The RX nomenclature plays a massively important role in Mazda's past. Historically, anything bearing the name has also had a rotary engine, but the rx-7 always had just that little bit more panache than its related RX family. The rx-7 is arguably most recognized by UK car buyers in FD form, the third and final generation that was built over the course of 10 years, between 1992 and 2002, imported in relatively low numbers to the UK. The FD rx-7's core-defining feature was its use of a twin-turbocharged twin-rotor 1.3 BREW engine. The RX-7 produced 237 bhp upon its release in the UK, but thanks to a lithe curb weight was hardly lacking against more powerful rivals like the Toyota Supra, Honda NSX and Nissan Skyline GTR. Greater than click here for more information on the upcoming all-new Toyota Supra. Today the RX-7 is a rare beast, especially one that has been untouched by the greasy fingers of backyard tuners, but find one with a good history and sensible previous owners and the rewards are considerable. There is a caveat with the RX-7 though, as with all rotary-engine Mazdas, the RX-7's highly strung engine not only requires lots of TLC to remain healthy, but also cyclical engine rebuilds thanks to the deterioration of rotor seals. Image 2 of 7 Image 2 of 7 RX-7 in detail. The original RX-7 was launched in 1978. Its light, compact fastback style and rotary engines proved a hit among buyers. Buoyed on by a strong Japanese economy, Mazda subsequently launched the larger and heavier FC model in 1986 with more of GT bent, but it failed to entertain like the previous car, which led to Mazda's decision to return to its lightweight roots with the third and so far final generation FD. The model launched in 1992 was definitely one of the most striking designs to come out of Japan up until then, its low-slung, shrink-wrapped bodywork being a complete contrast to the boxy FC. Launched exclusively with the aforementioned 1.3 BREW twin-turbo engine, the RX-7 was available with both 5-speed manual and sluggish 4-speed automatic options. The engine itself was based on the one used in Mazda's Cosmo Coupe, a Japanese domestic market 4-seater GT that not only combined turbocharging and a rotary engine for the first time, but also introduced the first application of digital sat-nav. Image 3 of 7 Image 3 of 7 featuring a sequential twin-turbo setup. The RX-7 employed just the one turbo at lower engine speeds to increase response, with the second only coming into play above 4,000 revolutions per minute. Although it reduced turbo lag, that very 90s of issues still plagued the RX-7's rotary engine, chiefly due to the engine's natural lack of torque. The other compromise of the turbos was the loss of the previous RX-7's dizzying rev limits. This time the motor was limited to a relatively normal 8,000 revolutions per minute. Launched in the UK in a single high specification to rival the Porsche 911, the RX-7 cost a substantial £32,000 in 1992's, but after a year of slow sales, Mazda dropped it down to £25,000. UK cars were set up with the stiffer suspension and strut braces of the Japanese Market R model, but the second-hand car market has subsequently been flooded with privately imported models, making it difficult to pin down the specific specifications due to the endless confusing Japanese model variants. Later cars eventually upped power to the 276 bhp gentleman's agreement benchmark, with curb weight always hovering around 1,300 kilograms, but the most focused models like the iconic Spirit R and Type RZ made famous in racing games were all specific to Japan. Jordan Katsiani's Mazda RX-7 1992 engine twin-chamber rotary, twin-turbo max power 237 bhp at 6,500 revolutions per minute, max torque 218 pounds-feet at 5,000 revolutions per minute, weight 1,284 kilograms, power to weight 184 bhp, tonneau 60 mph 5.4 sec, claimed top speed 156 miles per hour. Limited. We were lucky enough to drive a standard UK specification car. Keep scrolling. 4-hour full review by Richard Meaden. Mazda RX-7 review. I can still remember the last time I drove a third generation FD RX-7. But that's because it was also the first time. It was way back in 1993, when the car was new and causing a stir in the UK. There was a real buzz about it, and I'm not just talking about its audible rev limiter. Even those who would not normally be drawn to Japanese performance cars found the fast and voluptuous rotary-powered Mazda very hard to ignore. The same was true of Toyota's bewinged A80 twin-turbo Toyota Supra and Nissan's slightly more discreet, but no less appealing, 300ZX. That this was also the heyday for Honda's NSX makes it clear how strong the Japanese brands were in the early to mid-90s. Factor in BMW's equally fresh E36 M3 and Porsche's 968 and you'll appreciate this was something of a golden era for fans of fast, front-engined and relatively affordable rear-drive coupes. As you'd expect from Mazda, the RX-7 was the oddball of the bunch, courtesy of its twin-turbo 1.3 BREW Wankel engine, with twin-rotor chambers each displacing 654 cc and turbo equivalency applied. The RX-7 was deemed to have a 2.6-litre motor. The unit's compact size and light weight made it easy to package behind the front axle line and low in the chassis for a 5,050 weight distribution and low center of gravity. Greater than Mazda MX-5 review latest roadster impresses, up to a point. Mazda RX-7 twin-turbo Wankel rotary engine. The engine was unusual for its use of twin sequential turbos. Indeed, it was amongst the first of its kind. The concept was simple, the first turbo boosting from 2,000 revolutions per minute, with exhaust gases then fed directly from it into the second, identically sized, turbo to further reduce lag. It was an effective, if complex system that relied on precise electronic control of boost pressures to work seamlessly. Image 4 of 7. Image 4 of 7. In Japan it was tuned to deliver 255 bhp, but in Europe it developed a slightly softer 237 bhp at 6,500 revolutions per minute, with 218 pounds-feet of torque at 5,000 revolutions per minute. That still put it on a par with the 4-cylinder 968, but some way short of the more potent 6-cylinder M3, Supra and 300ZX. Nevertheless, the 1,284 kg RX-7 remained an appealing and rapid machine, capable of hitting 60 miles per hour from a standstill in 5.4 seconds and touching 156 miles per hour flat out. That was quick in the early 90s, kids. Mazda RX-7 FD in the UK. Just 210 of these curvy coupes were officially imported to the UK, and this is one of them. Of course, many more subsequently arrived from Japan in the late 90s, courtesy of the Single Vehicle Approval SVA import scheme, but the FD RX-7 remains a rare sight on our roads, especially in unmolested condition. The Fast and Furious movie franchise has plenty to answer for. Like all cars of this era, the RX-7 seems so small and compact. It might be small, but its curves evolved from a concept penned by Mazda's US design studio ensure it has plenty of presence. It's funny, though, how your mind plays tricks. Cars that you thought looked low and wide and had big wheels don't actually look that spectacular these days. No wonder, when a quick glance at the pretty 5-spoke rims shows they're only 16 inches in diameter and wrapped Indiana 22550 rubber. No matter, for the innate rightness of the shape and the courage of the design mean, the FD's looks remain surprisingly avant-garde. Their wasn't really anything like it before, and their hasn't been anything quite like it since. The smoked, one-piece, full-width taillight still makes a dramatic statement, while the pop-up headlights are proper 90s nostalgia. They were actually a necessity due to the low-line nature of the RX-7's nose. The door handle is positioned unusually high, up above the waistline and nestled against the B-pillar. You open the door expecting the glass to be frameless, but instead you find a heavy black surround framing the side glass lenses like a pair of thick-rimmed spectacles. The interior mirrors the exterior with its organic curves, but advances in materials mean the RX-7's black plastic cockpit has dated badly. It doesn't feel that great quality-wise, but it's a comfortable place to be thanks to squidgy seats that yield nicely, allowing you to sink into them for support. You don't sit as low as you might expect, and the steering wheel is quite big in diameter with proud stitching that also features on the handbrake and gear knob. Equipment levels are pretty basic by today's standards: leather upholstery, a pair of plastic luggage bins instead of rear seats, air conditioning, electric windows, powered mirrors and a stereo are all there is to shout about. The instruments are simple but really quite handsome, with a bold typeface, a speedo that reads to 180 miles per hour and a tacho that reads round to 9,000 revolutions per minute, even though the red line itself starts at an altogether more modest 7,000 revolutions per minute. Gauges for oil pressure, oil temperature and fuel level sit to the left of the tacho to complete a proudly analog binnacle. The view though the windscreen is dominated by curves, the rising line of each extremity swooping up towards you, while each door mirror captures a reflection of the long arc of the door tops that flow into the rear wheel arches. Everywhere you look, sections of the RX-7's fulsome shape swell into view to remind you you're driving something special. Mazda RX-7 on the road. The engine starts with a characteristic chanter before settling into a rapid idle, rotary tips whizzing round at a busy and raughty 2,500 revolutions per minute for a minute or two before the revs eventually settle down. The clutch is modestly weighty, the throttle has a nice measured resistance. The stubby gear lever hints at a snappy, short-throw gear shift that's clean and accurate, but the first few miles reveal the 5-speed transmission is blessed with a good rather than brilliant shift. Image 3 of 7. Image 3 of 7. The steering weight is more substantial than I was expecting, and that's a welcome surprise, for it confirms the sense that the RX-7 is a communicative car with well-matched control efforts and carefully measured responses. The cast aluminum pedals look attractive, feel good under your feet and are widely spaced across the footwell. The relationship between brake and throttle was clearly signed off by someone who enjoyed heeling to work, and the exhaust is soon popping and crackling nicely with each easily blipped downshift. Of course, the 13B motor was what made the RX-7 unique amongst its contemporary rivals, and it's what continues to add curiosity value today. The engineering differences between rotary and conventional internal combustion engines might be large, but the tangible differences from behind the wheel are surprisingly subtle. Yes, of course that has something to do with the motor not being in a screaming state of tune, unlike in the legendary Mazda race cars, but it also shows that while rotary engines are still seen as eccentric, they are impressively straightforward in the way they go about the business. This car has an aftermarket exhaust, which is a bit more vocal than an OE system, but strip away the snorty soundtrack and you find an engine blessed with refinement and good manners. Rise through the revs and it has a finely serrated smoothness that confounds your senses and encourages you to work it hard. It's a genuinely enjoyable engine, talky with little lag. It delivers a solid shove from 3,000 revolutions per minute through to 6,000 revolutions per minute. Beyond that it runs out of puff a bit, yet still pulls meaningfully to the red line, signaled by the infamous buzzer as a reminder to take another gear. If you're remotely intrigued by cars' oily bits, the RX-7's motor is special. It doesn't dominate the whole character of the car, but it asserts itself nicely and sets the tone for a driving experience that's outside the norm but delivers the goods. This particular car has clearly lived a life, one in which it has covered more than 90,000 miles. That said, while the dampers and bushes aren't in the first flushes of youth, and despite the front axle running on a different brand of tire to the rear, it still manages to feel tidy. It rides with pliancy, masking minor surface imperfections and absorbing potholes without too much fuss, though there are a few creaks from the interior plastics. More impressive is the way the innate balance of this front mid-engined, rear-drive chassis shines through, and how you rapidly build a clear picture of the sharpness and agility for which the third-gen RX-7 was rightly praised when new. Funnily enough, of the memories I have of my first drive in an RX-7 back in 1993, the most lasting impression is of a car that demanded respect, something the 22-year-old me had just enough of to keep the Mazda out of the weeds. One moment in particular sticks in my mind. The road was damp and chased across hilly terrain. Traveling at enthusiastic but not silly speed, the RX-7 squeezed into a gently curving compression. As the suspension got towards the bottom of its travel, the vertical and lateral loads pushed the tail out of line with little warning. It was one of those moments caught by luck and youthful, sparky synapses rather than sage car control, not least because these were the days when I was testing my own limits as much as those of the car. It certainly taught me a lesson. My driving skills and judgment have come a long way in the last 20 years, but I still can't help but feel a little wary of this old Mazda for the first few miles. The nicely weighted steering is complemented by a calm rate of response that's typical for fast cars of this era, just under 3 turns lock to lock, and which makes it easy to confidently place the RX-7 in corners with intuitive precision. You need only encourage it into long curves with a small squeeze of steering input, then relax the lock as the corner opens out. It finds a very satisfying and easily sustained flow. Image 7 of 7. Image 7 of 7. The balance is beautifully neutral, with just enough bite from the front tires to generate decent grip and response, but not enough to induce oversteer. Likewise, the rear end has strong traction, not a surprise given the rear tires aren't exactly overburdened with torque. In short, the perfect weight distribution and sweet ratio of ground to grip ensures a harmony that lets the chassis work unhindered by dynamic imbalance. That it's not fighting with an engine that's too potent underlines the fact that sometimes less really is more. Carry meaningful speed into a second or third gear corner, chase the throttle from apex to exit, and you feel the car and its Dawson Limited slip diff load up nicely, sitting down on the outside rear as the loads increase and those sequential turbos start to blow. It's at this point I feel something of the RX-7 I recall, for when pushed hard it rapidly makes the transition from just on the limit to some way of it. It's fun and harmless enough in the dry, but I can clearly see how I nearly came unstuck all those years ago. The brakes are up to the job of fast road driving, with progressive response, but they don't have the capabilities of those on today's high-performance cars, so you have to be a little sympathetic. You toast them on track, but then cars of this age weren't developed with as much in reserve as today's performance models. It's been great to be reacquainted with the RX-7. 2 decades of rampant engineering progress and skyrocketing performance mean Mazda's flagship sports car is no longer the force it was back in 1993, but it remains a thoroughly charming, fascinating, intriguing and usefully rapid car. It does things differently, as you'd hope, but it does them well. Well enough to remain the high point for Mazda's rotary efforts. Here's hoping last year's glorious RX Vision concept makes the leap to production and rekindles some of this RX-7's abundant magic.